Republican Congressman Byron Donalds joins us right now. He represents Florida's 19th congressional district, and you know him well from all the drama to elect a speaker a few weeks ago. Congressman, thank you very much. So why now for this fight?
Well, why now is really simple. The Treasury Secretary said we are at our borrowing limit. There is no more room to borrow money. So if you're ever going to take an opportunity to look at your spending habits, you do it when you run out of room on your credit card. That's what's happening on Capitol Hill. So that's the why now. The bigger question is, what should we do? And what House Republicans are saying is we should be taking a look at our spending priorities on Capitol Hill. Because when you run out of room to borrow funds, the first thing you do is you look at your spending habits. You don't say, give me more money to borrow. That's the wrong approach.
This is money that was already allocated, though, money that was already voted out the door, money that was already due. It's not future spending habits. I understand the desire to get future spending habits under control, but is this the time to have that fight when economists say that it could send the economy into a tailspin?
Well, a couple things. We have to reset the narrative on this. Number one, right now, for every dollar that comes in tax revenue, Washington spends about $1.30. So this is not about future money you want to just spend. It is about the spending priorities that got us here to this point. Let me give you a couple. A few weeks ago, the $1.7 trillion omnibus deal that nobody got to read on Capitol Hill, but was voted out right before Christmas. I'll give you another one. The so-called Inflation Reduction Act, where $400 billion goes to the Green New Deal, something obviously we can't afford because now we're having to raise the debt ceiling. So this is about your previous spending priorities and what those need to be going forward. That's why you have to address it right now.
You mentioned a couple of Democratic initiatives in the past, though, and I know you were elected in 2020, so this doesn't fall on your shoulders. But in the past, Republicans have been perfectly fine with raising the debt ceiling for Republican presidents and pushing through Republican priorities like tax cuts, which, you know, arguably didn't really have much of an effect for the middle class or the lower classes, and only added to the deficit. There's a lot of analysis, independent analysis out there that says that. So if you're watching this and you're wondering why this is happening now, how do you convince somebody that this is not just partisan politics?
Well, a couple of things. Let's go back to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I think that's what you're referring to. The analysis is actually quite clear. The federal government has raised more tax revenue after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act than before. Right now, we are taking in about 20% of GDP in tax revenue. That is a record for the United States government. We've never collected so much tax revenue. So Tax Cut and Jobs Act did a couple of other things. It actually spurred more economic growth. Income growth at middle income levels grew at the fastest rate, in 35 years under TCJA. So those things actually worked for the American people. And so what we're saying now is you have to find a way to keep tax policy in place. Obviously, it's worked for America and it's worked for the coffers of the federal government, but your spending is out of control. We have to address it.
Nonpartisan analysis has said that the tax cuts that you're referring to, the Trump tax cuts, have not paid for themselves. And even a right-leaning analysis of it has said that it's going to take some time to tell if they will pay for themselves. You talk about how we're spending $1.30 for every dollar we're taking in. Why not raise taxes? Why not find a way to raise taxes on the wealthiest among us?
Because all you're going to do is actually create more of the economic consternation more than we have right now. Raising taxes, taking money away from the productive people of America is never the answer, because politicians on Capitol Hill don't know how to constrain themselves about spending the people's money. That is the wrong prescription.
Well, we're talking about spending the people's money. Why not tax the people at the very top, the Jeff Bezos, the Warren Buffetts, the people who have a ton of money?
Here's what I'm going to tell you. When you raise taxes at the top, the federal government actually takes in less revenue. That is the empirical data, which is why I'm saying if you look at Tax Cut and Jobs Act, since we're talking about taxes now, the federal government has taken more money in as a percentage of our economy than it ever has. That's tax policy under Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter. You keep going back and back and back.
So where do you want to cut? What do you want to cut? I've already gone through
a couple of things.
Go.
One is, let's actually go back and revisit what was in this $1.7 trillion omnibus deal. We shouldn't have done that. It was excessive. It was done at the midnight hour. What's in the Inflation Reduction Act had nothing to do with reducing inflation.
So what do you want to cut, though? You're talking about bills that you don't agree with. What do you want to cut?
Hold on, I'm going to give it to you.
Okay.
You have in there $400 billion associated with Green New Deal subsidies, things we don't have the money for. You start there. The third thing overall, you end the COVID emergencies because, newsflash America, COVID is over now. All the money that we have spent up during the COVID pandemic is now in our baseline. You go back in, take that money back to pre-pandemic levels, it puts us on a much more sustainable glide path from a financial picture. I think if you do those things, you can be at an agreement to actually increase the debt ceiling and then get serious about some of the long-term issues our country is facing.
You want to cut all of the green initiatives, all of the subsidies out there. Democrats aren't going to say yes to that. Where's the compromise?
Well, that's what negotiations are for. I'm not going to negotiate through your television program, although it's fun to have this conversation with you. What we should be doing on Capitol Hill is they bring their ideas, we bring our ideas, and we negotiate. But the talking points from the White House about there will be no negotiation is just frankly irresponsible, not what we should be doing right now.
You want to talk about Social Security and Medicare?
No, right now nobody's talking about Social Security and Medicare. I know that's a constant theme in media right now.
Well, because Republicans in the past have talked about cutting Social Security and Medicare. It didn't just come out of nowhere.
Nobody's talking about cutting Social Security and Medicare. What we're talking about is actually studying those programs to figure out how you maintain them over the long term. Because CBO just came out the other day and said Social Security is going insolvent in 2033. That's a different problem set that Washington must tackle.
You know,
but with
economists
respect to the debt ceiling, we have to deal with our spending problems.
Would help with that because it would strengthen the tax base. Do you have any plans to consider immigration reform?
No, we have no problem. We have no plans to deal with immigration reform because the first thing you have to do is secure the border. Because what we must also acknowledge is the 250,000 immigrants coming across the southern border claiming asylum under Joe Biden's handling of the border is actually exacerbating state budgets and local governments. That's why the mayor of New York City is asking for fiscal relief from the federal government because their social services programs are overwhelmed with the migrants showing up in the streets of New York City.
Congressman Byron Donalds, thank you so much for joining us on our program today. It's really interesting to get the perspective of what you want to cut and how you want to do this and why now is the time. We appreciate your time, sir.
Anytime. Thank you.